Thank you very much for joining me on News Hour Direct. Sanjeev Sanyal, you are in the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, but I also know you and your interests in history because you've written several books on history. Today, the raging debate in India, or should I say Bharat, is whether the name is being changed from India to Bharat. Is there consultation that is required? Is there a policy change? Will this mean that our passports will change? All kinds of speculation in the ether. How do you look at the new nomenclature that has been adopted by the government, President of Bharat, Prime Minister of Bharat? Do you think this is really a name change, or do you think this is owning up our ancient civilizational existence?
So first of all, I don't know what the fuss is about. Very frankly, both the names have been used for a long time. And our constitution begins by saying India, that is Bharat. Both the names are there. You can choose which one you want. And in Indian languages, we basically use Bharat. In English, we tended to use India, but you know, there's no particular reason why we can't use Bharat, because after all, even the English version of the Constitution also says India, that is Bharat. So I personally think, you know, one can use both, and there is no reason why we should make a big fuss about this.
But then why do you think there is a fuss? In fact, I know you're not a politician, but there's virtually a split down the middle because a new alliance of opposition parties have, really come up, and they have called themselves the India Alliance, and therefore they say that the ruling dispensation has decided to go in for Bharat, just not to allow the opposition alliance to own up brand India. How do you see this?
Well, that you need to ask the politicians. But what I can tell you sociologically, the issue is the following. There was an English-speaking old elite of this country that unfortunately was misreading the constitution as reading India that was Bharat. All that has happened is that they have discovered that the constitution says India that is Bharat.
Why is Bharat different and you say more appropriate than India? Many people say India name came up in 1833 when the British really brought in the governor of Bengal and called him the governor of India. What are the antecedents, and which do you think is more appropriate?
Well, both the names are very old. So let me tell you the history. So first of all, the name Bharat has two origins, but there's a Puranic story about this about a King Bharat, King Bharat, and there is a much older story about an ancient tribe in the Vedic period, in the Bronze Age, called the Bharata tribe, or also called the Trutsu tribe. Let me tell you the story about the Bharata Trutsu tribe, and then I will show you how it's linked to the word India. So what happens in the Bronze Age, of the Rig Veda, it mentions that there is this tribe called the Bharatas, also called the Trutsus, who live in what is now Haryana. And they call their homeland the land of seven rivers, or the Sapta Sindhu. This is basically the Saraswati and its tributaries. It doesn't include the rivers of Punjab and other rivers you may think. There's just a very small area, Saraswati and its tributaries. Now what happens is that they get attacked by a coalition of 10 tribes from the west. And so the chieftain of the Bharata, Sudas, and the guru, Vasishtha, lead a campaign westward, and there is a great battle on the banks of the Parushni, which we now know as the Ravi, where the Bharatas completely crush the alliance of 10 kings. When in fact, there's a description of how the fleeing soldiers of the 10 kings get drowned in the Ravi as they're trying to run away. Anyway, having won this battle, they then turn eastward and defeat a chieftain called Bheda on the banks of the Yamuna. So as a result of which, the Bharata tribe ends up creating India's first empire. And the chief, Raja Sudas, then does the first Ashwamedha Yagya, by virtue of which he gets crowned as the Chakravarti. And his symbol is the chakra, the wheel, which, by the way, the Mauryan version of which is now in our national flag. Now, then the Bharatas do something quite unique. You see, typically what happened, tribe wins over other tribes, it forces those tribes to worship their gods. Instead, what the Bharatas do is that they invite all the defeated tribes, and in fact even the tribes they hadn't defeated but happened to be in touch with, and they then compile all the hymns, the knowledge and so on of all these tribes into the texts that we now know as the Vedas. And then they say that far from imposing our ideas on you, what we will do is we will create a space for all the gods of all the tribes around the sacrificial fire. In fact, the last chant of the Rig Veda is about this, about how the sacrificial fire has a space for all the tribes and their gods around it. So this was an idea of assimilation as opposed to imposition that then spreads over time and then ends up spreading across India. So what happens is that this idea of Bharata, which came from a small Haryanavi tribe, this becomes a civilization, and people across the subcontinent accept this. So we all come, I'm from Bengal, I come from 2,000 kilometers to the east, but my forefathers at some point accepted this idea of Bharatiya, therefore I am called myself a Bharatiya. I'm not Haryanavi. So that's how I have ended up being a part of the civilization. Now, what happens is that the idea of 7 rivers also spreads. So the original 7 rivers were just the tributaries of the Saraswati. But later on you find the 7 rivers are described in many other texts, etc. And it includes not just the Saraswati, but also the Ganga, the Yamuna, the Sindhu, which is the Indus, the Godavari, Narmada, Kaveri, and so on. And so therefore now you can see that the whole idea of the Bharata tribe has now become a civilizational idea across the entire subcontinent. So Sapta Sindhu is also another name that is used for this landscape. Now foreigners know this, so they also called us Sapta Sindhu. And the earliest reference to India in a text outside of India, which clearly mentions this, is the Avestan texts of the ancient Persians, where the term Sapta Sindhu is written as Hapta Hindu, because there is a phonetic shift from Sir to Her, which by the way also exists in modern Assamese. So Saraswati becomes Harahwati, and what happens is that Sapta Sindhu becomes Hapta Hindu. So one important thing to remember, that the word Hindu is first not there in its own right by itself, but together with the idea of the 7 rivers, Hapta Hindu. Now, Hindu then becomes the generic term used for Indians, and it then travels westward and becomes India by the time you end up with the Greeks and other Europeans and people in the Mediterranean. So this is how that term exists. The term India is indeed foreign, but its origins are in the Sapta Sindhu, and the term basically the Bharatas called their homeland.
Well, so Sanjeev Sanyal, let me ask you, you've given a fascinating historical reference where both coexisted. But today, objections are being raised on the ground of Hindi and English, and is this a backdoor emphasis on Hindi being foisted on southern states, for example, by referring to India as Bharat? How do you respond to the language debate that also creeps into this?
This is entirely pointless. In every Indian language, including the southern ones, the term Bharata is used as the name by which we know our country, Bharat, Bharatvarsha, and various combinations thereof. The Puranas clearly mention the people who live south of the Himalayas and north of the ocean are the people of Bharata, or the descendants of Bharata. I'm a Bengali, I'm not Hindi speaking. In my country, Bharatvarsha is a commonly used. In fact, by the way, the national anthem, which is written in Bengali, also mentions Bharat. So this is a commonly used term. If you look at the Tamils, who is one of the greatest Tamil poets, it's Subramania Bharati. So, this is widely used. I have no idea how this debate even exists. Now, yes, it is true in European languages, the word India is used, but I don't see what the big deal is also of using Bharat. After all, many countries in the world have dual names, Great Britain and the United Kingdom, Holland and Netherlands, Japan and Nippon, and so on and so forth. So you can interchangeably use both. I think the problem really is that the use of Bharata is being introduced into the English language. Now, I don't know why we should be the custodians of purity in the English language.
Well, let me ask you sociologically. Do you think it matters to the people of India? Because politically, whatever the issue may be, do you think people of India have a association with the term Bharat? And are there any generational attachments to Bharat versus India?
I don't know about generational, but it certainly is the case that, the term Bharata is a much more evocative term because after all we say Bharat Mata Ki Jai, we don't say India Mata Ki Jai. So when it comes to evocative things, the idea of Bharat or Bhavani Bharati, after all when we, Vande Mataram, when we are bowing, to which mother are we bowing? We are Bhavani Bharati. So this idea of Bharata is a very old one, which is very evocative. And so yes, at some more civilizational, visceral level, most Indians associate with it more closely. That doesn't mean that, we have some hatred against the word India. We also use it. I use it commonly in my writings and so on. And I think that will continue. I really do not understand what this debate is about.
Well, the debate is about the fact that suddenly from President of India, it becomes the President of Bharat. And therefore, questions are being raised that is the government now going back? Will Digital India become Digital Bharat? Will Startup India become Startup Bharat? All kinds of memes and all kinds of connotations are being made. Do you think it's a facile debate, or do you think there's substance?
There's a pointless debate in my view, and perhaps only pertinent to a very small proportion of India's sort of Lutyens, Delhi, and a few other South Bombay crowd. Most Indians call country Bharat. We also accept the word India as useful. Like, for example, if you had to have bricks, the I in it would be needed in order for it to be used, because you need a vowel in there. And if somebody wants to continue using India in there in order to be able to pronounce bricks, then you should continue with it. We're hardly going to say we're going to have an unpronounceable as the term to use instead of bricks, right?